It's the middle of winter on Chincoteague Island, the ultimate small town.
How many you got?
Just one. Tessa Van Hart had a pizza delivery, as she had many nights before. She was supposed to be back in a few minutes.
But she didn't come back.
A call comes in to the local police station.
Tessa Van Hart is missing. They drive looking for this woman. They become concerned. It's an island. How could she be missing? They see a car running. No one's behind the wheel. They find that to be extremely odd.
God.
And what they see in the back seat horrifies them.
Or in Richmond, that there had been a murder on the island of Chincoteague.
When this call came in to Danny Plott at his home, he had no way of knowing the far-reaching effects it would have on everyone on that island. A remarkable chain of events has been set in motion. He just didn't know how remarkable it was.
When my partner and I, Jim Huddle, arrived on scene, we were given details by the Chincoteague Police Department.
They have determined this person is 23 years of age. Her name is Tessa Van Hart.
Tessa was a beautiful young lady who had a whole future in front of her. She had 2 kids, a loving husband.
She was beautiful. She really was. She just had this way about her. You know, she was quiet at first, but as you got to know her, there was just a special way about her.
The officers report that Tessa Van Hart is employed at this pizza shop. Her husband also works there. Plott is also informed that her husband, Walter, reported her missing by dialing 911.
Tessa was found in the back seat with 2 gunshot wounds to the back of her head. There wasn't a lot of blood because the wounds were contained inside her skull.
Plott also observes grass and dirt and mud on the victim's knees. She obviously didn't get that in the backseat of that car. So there is another crime scene. They just don't know where.
Pizza's still here.
Yeah, so was her purse.
There was still money in it. She was not robbed.
To the experienced investigator, that would indicate that somebody is only interested in this victim, not in her possessions. And that's very different. Why her?
Let's have forensics. Take the car back to the lot. You want to go talk to that husband?
Yeah.
Lock it down, Steve.
Yes, sir.
So Plott has learned what he can by looking around this car. Now it's time to talk to Walter.
Notifying a family they've lost a loved one, I've done several times. It's almost like you're the Grim Reaper. This was a young man who had just lost his wife and now was a father of 2 small children and was almost in shock.
Excellent mother, beautiful woman. She was my soulmate, I'll say that.
When they were going to get married, you just knew. He knew from the get-go that she was right for him.
She's a great mother to her kids, what little bit of time she got with them. The hardest thing I ever had to do is the next day tell them, you know, the mom went to heaven. It's the only way I could put it, you know.
I think the word that I get the most when I ask people about my mom is beautiful and sweet, caring. A lot of people are like, oh my gosh, you look just like your mom. It's good to hear. I think it's my favorite compliment when I hear that. When I was younger, obviously there was a lot of things that I wasn't told, you know, for a reason. I do remember being at my grandmother's house and asking if they had found him yet, bad man or whatever I called him then, and they said no. And I remember like that sense of like fear then.
I do remember telling Cora about her mother. And I do remember her telling me or asking me, would I be her mommy? And I said, honey, I'll always be your mama. And she'll always be your mommy.
You and Tessa, you work together in the pizza shop?
Yeah.
He was in the back. He did most of the cooking and she did the delivering.
The night everything happened, she came in the afternoon and did deliveries at night.
How many you got?
Just one. Love you.
He watched his wife walk out the door with full expectation that she would return back.
But she didn't come back. And the longer she was gone, the more alarmed he became.
I was thinking, oh, something happened to the car, you know. And then a little bit of time went by, and we ended up calling the police department and getting them involved.
Do you know where Tessa was supposed to be delivering the pizza?
No. But we should have it written down at the shop.
We felt like the beginning of this crime was a call for a pizza delivery. And in fact, there was a slip of paper that we were able to gain that listed the house that she was sent to.
So they go out to see this house.
There's nobody living here right now?
The house that she was sent to was a vacation or rental home. This was January. Most of the vacation homes are rented during warm weather when Chincoteague is full of people visiting.
This place is totally locked up and secure. No lights, no power, no anything happening.
Got lights on next door. Let's check it out.
We thought that maybe someone at the pizza place had accidentally written down the wrong address. So we believe Tessa went to the house near where the pizza was ordered and attempted to make delivery.
As they're approaching this other home,
Look at this.
Plot sees something in the grass that draws his immediate attention.
There was a small amount of blood found in the backyard of this house and was most likely where Tessa was murdered.
So now the focus is this house. Who is in there with the lights on? Because there seems to have been a homicide in your backyard. The police department on Chincoteague Island has discovered a homicide on this very small island where they've never seen anything like this.
Chincoteague Island is a small community on Virginia's eastern shore. It's a beautiful place.
A lot of families come here for the summer. But in the winter, it's a completely different place.
And now, Detective Danny Plott has discovered a crime scene in the backyard of an occupied home. Now detectives need to speak to whoever it is that's in there.
State police, open up.
What do you want?
The house was occupied by a man. He was not cooperative in questioning. He said he didn't order a pizza.
Get off my property.
Sir, we still need to ask you a few questions.
When Plott encounters this resistive personality who has a crime scene in his backyard, it makes him a prime suspect.
You didn't see or hear anything this evening?
This guy was different. He was hinky.
Now, there is a storm, and that's true. Could it have obscured things, noise, or hearing something? Yeah, it could, but it still seems rather odd. It's okay to be odd. It's alarming when you're odd standing next to a crime scene where someone's been murdered. That's a different problem.
You mind if we search your yard for evidence?
Be my guest.
Well, that's not all we'd like to do.
A polygraph was suggested, and I believe his statement was, if I take a polygraph and pass it, will you leave me alone? And of course we said absolutely. After we established this house as a crime scene, our forensic techs did the best they could to examine it. When Tessa had been assaulted and murdered, it was cold and it was raining. We knew our evidence could be washed away.
They photograph, they measure, they do everything they can do, but the conditions make it almost impossible to have anything of value come out of that examination. However, Detective Plott is not giving up. He has one more tactic he can deploy. Police canines are often used to search crime scene areas. The olfactory senses of a dog are 600 times that of a human. They smell things that humans don't even notice. Every dog has a different alert signal. When they find something of interest. Something doesn't belong here.
Sir!
We were able to recover a .22 caliber shell casing. We weren't sure, but we believe was part of the crime.
That casing becomes very important. It's now physical evidence. It could link them to a homicide weapon.
We took this guy to our headquarters in Chesapeake, Virginia, which was about 2 hours away.
Mr. Perez is now in a police station and not the comfort of his own home.
I don't know how the blood got in my yard, I'm being honest.
So he took the polygraph. He passed the polygraph. There was no signs that he was deceptive in any way.
What seems like a promising lead just evaporated. What that does for Plott, it takes him back to square one.
Hey, can I ask you one more thing before you go?
What?
We wanted to know about the house next door. Who owns it? Was there someone there?
Perez explains his neighbors.
Neighbors are always gone.
They're from another state. They only come in the summer. He hasn't seen them since Labor Day. Nobody's around that property. They don't rent it out. Somebody didn't order a pizza from this house. So Plott's eliminated two things: the owners of this property and Mr. Perez. And where does that leave Plott? As if he was just arriving. He doesn't know any more than he did. The best evidence now can be found on the remains of the victim.
Dr. Bush?
Autopsies are extremely useful. When you find a deceased person, what you see is not always what happened. Were they shot or stabbed someplace that's not readily apparent?
Plot learns this girl had been beaten. She shows evidence of blunt force trauma to the face and to the chest, where she's been punched and or kicked. The coroner also determines that there's evidence of sexual assault and seminal fluid has been recovered from the victim.
Dr. Bush said that she died from either one of 2 gunshot wounds to the back of her head. Both were .22 caliber rounds, which was what we found in the backyard.
Thanks, Dr. Bush.
So now we know more than we did know. Someone orders a pizza. Our victim arrives to deliver same, encounters her attacker, who then rapes her and then kills her with a .22 caliber weapon. This indicates a plan. He doesn't have a weapon of opportunity, he brings a weapon because he intends to use it.
We began to look at anyone on the island. Was there someone that was infatuated with her? Was there someone that was stalking her?
Because they did not have a suspect, everyone was a possible player.
So who is this person? Who is this shadow in the rain?
We were almost positive that someone had to know their way around this island to do this, to know where Tessa would go and basically lie in wait. We thought we would find this person pretty quickly.
So let's go back to the pizza shop. Let's talk to all the employees, all the co-workers, and see what can be learned.
You were working with Tessa the night of the incident.
Yeah.
The girl that took the call was just racked with guilt, as if it was her that sent Tessa out to be murdered, which of course she had not. We asked, what did he sound like? Did he sound old? Did he sound young?
I don't know.
All she really told us was he sounded like everybody else that called here. She's telling the truth, but it's not what you want to hear.
Did he ask for Tessa or if she was working?
Several people delivered pizzas from that place. How did this person know that Tessa was going to deliver the pizza?
So you also deliver pizza for the shop?
We went as far as to ask the female delivery drivers, especially, have you ever been someplace that the hair stands up on the back of your neck when this person answers the door?
People instinctually know suspicious behavior when they see it. You don't have to explain it. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't look right. It strikes you as a little bit scary. There's something wrong with this.
There's this one guy that he's kind of off.
She had delivered a pizza to this man before, and he tried several times to get her to come inside.
He just gave me the creeps.
Well, that's interesting, my dear, because we are looking for a really creepy guy.
This guy appeared to be a good suspect.
This employee identifies a customer that frightened her, made her feel vulnerable, made her uncomfortable to be around him. What if this predator makes these calls all the time, getting up the nerve, trying to decide how to do this? He's not asking to have a pizza delivered. He's asking to have a victim delivered. We need to talk to this guy. Danny Plott of the Virginia State Police is on the search for a suspect, and a co-worker of Tessa Van Hart may have just provided one.
She said this guy was different, that he gave people the creeps.
The employee identifies this person as Matthew Birch. He is a United States Coast Guardsman assigned to the station on Chincoteague Island.
So we went to the Coast Guard. Their commands are usually very cooperative. They certainly don't want any member of their command to be involved in criminal activity.
Matt, we appreciate you sitting down with us.
I don't know what you want to talk to me for. I haven't done anything wrong.
Bertz's body language and his demeanor point out that he is nervous. He doesn't make eye contact with Plot.
Whenever we had someone that appeared to be a good suspect, we did our best to remind each other not to get tunnel vision because a person fits a little bit.
You live off base, Matt?
I do.
You don't want to accuse anybody of anything because that makes them shut up. It's more of an art than it is a science when you talk to people like this. Most people have difficulty formulating a lie to every question you ask. So you're liable to get more of a spontaneous, truthful reply to a simple line of questioning. And Plot does it in a non-threatening way, which is the technique.
Just like everybody else on the island, I'm sure you heard what happened to Tessa.
Yeah. It's terrible.
You ask questions. Do you like pizza, Mr. Birch? Do you order pizza from the local shop? You have a different motive than pizza, but he doesn't know that.
We finally said, have you ever offered the pizza delivery to come inside? Well, yeah, I've offered to share the pizza with them.
How about Tessa Van Hart? You ever asked her to come inside?
I don't know. Probably.
So what?
He got a little bit more irritated as we start to hone in on where were you. He realizes they're after me.
Matt, can you tell us where you were the night she was killed?
I wasn't around. I was visiting some friends in Maryland.
Can you prove it?
I probably have some credit card receipts.
We were able to exclude him because he was not present on the island that night. There are a lot of different people in the world, and this guy was very different, but he was not Tessa's killer.
So they continue to investigate. Plot and his associates practically moved onto Chickatee Island.
We established a command post, and we brought multiple special agents in to run down leads and do interviews.
I want you and your team covering this entire north side of the island.
So because it is small and people tend to know a lot about other people, Plot and other officers begin to canvass every resident.
We talked to so many people. Some ex-boyfriends.
I'm with the police department. Man, I'm sorry to wake you up.
I believe we talked to an ex-girlfriend of the husband.
Morning, man.
But there was absolutely nothing there.
We heard back from forensics about Tessa's car.
Forensic technicians went through the car top to bottom to try to find anything. But the car did not give us enough leads to find who had done this. It was terribly frustrating, and we felt pressure. I think it's probably more pressure that we brought on ourselves, that we need to know who killed this young mother.
There are occasions when a murderer isn't skillful, isn't a criminal genius, he's just lucky. Nobody hears him. Nobody sees him. And they can disappear. The world is a big place. And now fear is deepening. What if he has his eye on someone else on this island?
Was this just the start of something horrible? If you're cold-blooded enough to do it once, what stops you from doing it a second time?
This case really, really did scare everyone.
Once upon a time, we left our doors unlocked, and I, at my house, started locking my door, which is something I never did.
That's just not what the island was, and then all of a sudden it was.
There was someone on this island, we believed, that had done this and may have been watching us thinking, these guys don't have a clue. And unfortunately, we didn't in a lot of ways.
They worked this case every day for months, and they have developed absolutely nothing in terms of information, nothing in terms of a suspect. The family wants answers.
Sitting and waiting and biting your nails a lot and calling up to the police station, trying to get answers, but they didn't have really the answers that I wanted at the time. No.
How do you move forward with your life without having any answer as to why a huge piece of your heart is no longer there?
It was always in the back of your head. If your phone rang, if somebody knocked on your door, was that going to be the call, the answer? I got 2 little ones at home I'm trying to take care of. I had to step up, because they were my inspiration to keep me going.
The leads were starting to dry up. At first, we just came back during the week for a while. Then we would come back every other week. And then finally, the case is classified as inactive pending further leads. I don't know how best to describe it. It was disappointing to all of us. After a while, I had been transferred to the Fugitive Apprehension Unit.
Hey, Danny.
Jim grabbed me one day in the office. He was like really excited.
Finally have something.
A phone call comes in that changes everything.
He said, "We have a lead on Tessa's murder." And I said, "No blank."
All of a sudden, everything about this case is back on the front burner.
The lead that came to light was a man named Brian Cherrix.
This person is an inmate currently charged in a number of crimes. He reveals a confession that was made to him about the murder of Tessa Van Hart.
Mr. Cherrix was willing to give this information if there would be leniency shown in the crime he was accused of.
It's a common thing that happens in law enforcement. You make a deal with the devil, where some inmate knows about a crime, wants something in return, knowing they can provide you with something you want.
Unfortunately, the greater percent of them don't ever pan out.
My understanding you have some information for us?
I had a standard approach in dealing with people like that. I would tell them this. I'd say, you have less than a minute to tell me something I don't know. If you can't tell me something I don't know, you're of no use to me. And you can rot in this prison until you die.
It was my cousin, Ryan Bergman.
How exactly you know that?
Told me all about it.
This is blood to Mr. Cherrix, not somebody he ran across in a jail somewhere. That makes it even more promising.
You want a deal? We're gonna need a lot more than that.
I know details. I know everything.
Cherrix said his cousin told him that he had lured her to deliver a pizza and had grabbed her, sodomized her, and that he had shot her with a .22 rifle.
That was never released to the press. So Mr. Cherrix is in possession of information that matches the physical evidence at the scene that no one could possibly know unless they were at the scene. So he is more than promising. He is amazing at this point.
Well, he told me where he put the gun.
Cherrix said his cousin throws that rifle in a body of water that only he knows where it is.
So Plot says to him, great, where can I find Ryan Bergman? And Mr. Cherrix says something that Plot is shocked at.
Thing is, he's dead.
He's dead?
He says he was killed in a car wreck last year.
As elated as I was, it was tamped down by the fact that the man who Cherrix said had killed Tessa was deceased. But maybe this man met his demise because he deserved it after what he did.
They do determine Bergman was in fact killed in an auto accident, as Cherrix said. But you cannot rely on the statement Bergman was the perpetrator. You need to establish whether or not that's in fact true.
The Virginia State Police have a working dive team statewide. 2 divers came to Chincoteague, and the area where this weapon had been thrown
Water does bad things to metal objects, so it may or may not be survivable after 2 years submerged. But it could be.
The divers usually do a grid search. They came out and they couldn't find the weapon. We speculated, did the man who killed her go back and get the weapon? Did he put it somewhere else? And so Cherrix was interviewed again. Why can't we find the weapon?
Well, it's out there. I could go out there with you and show you exactly where it was thrown.
Now, that's interesting. How exactly would you know that?
We began to think, was he there during the crime? So we took him up on his offer. Point us where this is.
This is some distance away from the area he described as where it was thrown initially. The dive team goes in the new location. And within a few minutes, they come out of the river with a .22 caliber rifle.
Right where I thought.
Once the rifle was recovered, we're ecstatic. Can we test the murder weapon for ballistics, which we could?
The people in the laboratory that have this weapon tell Plott the serial number cannot be read, but they were able to match the casing to the extractor and ejector on the weapon. That is the murder weapon.
We tried to track who owned that rifle and where the rifle had been, and we were still trying to tie the cousin that Cherrix mentions to the murder.
Plott learns that Cherrix's ex-wife also knew Mr. Bergman.
Thank you for meeting with us.
Plott explains that he is investigating Mr. Bergman as a person potentially responsible for the crime.
I don't think he would ever do something like that.
The ex-wife of Mr. Cherrix says there's absolutely no way. Bergman is a gentle soul. He's a nice person.
Besides, he wasn't even on the island when that girl got killed.
How do you know that?
I remember him talking to Ryan about it on the phone the day after it happened.
It was concluded that the cousin could not have committed this murder. That leaves us thinking that Brian Lee Cherrix killed Tessa Van Hart.
How about your ex-husband? Can you describe his personality for me?
Brian Lee Cherrix, to my knowledge, never came up as a suspect to start out with. His family was well known and respected on the island of Chincoteague.
Separated, but
She says we had children together, and a normal guy, and he worked. So she paints a picture of a standard American male, not some wide-eyed monster.
Did Brian own any weapons?
he did. He owned a rifle.
Do you happen to know what kind of rifle?
I don't really know guns, but I think it was a .22.
So Plott pulls a picture out of his notebook, and he says, does that look familiar to you?
Yeah,
You're certain?
positive.
Now Plott knows, without question. The frustration flies away, and it becomes euphoric. The shadow has a name, and his name is Brian Cheriks. Danny Plott of the Virginia State Police has been engaged in a frustrating 2-year-long investigation of the murder of 23-year-old Tessa Van Hart. And he has arrived at the identity of the perpetrator, Brian Cheriks.
We have the murder weapon. Brian's ex-wife identified the .22 rifle as belonging to him. We had the man that killed Tessa Van Hart.
Now it's time to get a statement from him. It's a sophisticated game of tag, and Mr. Cheriks is it.
We went back to Cheriks with all this information that the cousin couldn't have done it, that was his rifle.
I gave you the truth.
But Brian Lee Cheriks stuck to his story.
Brian, I think it's time you start being honest with us.
I already told you what happened. I already told you where I tossed it.
Ooh. So, who are we talking to here? Brian, you have two personalities. One's your cousin's and one's yours?
It was very telling that he would slip from saying his cousin's name to first person.
He's unraveling in the course of this interrogation.
You want this hanging over your head? You owe it to Tessa's family, Brian.
That's when Brian Cheriks suddenly has a change of heart.
I believe he knew that he was going to be charged, and it's strictly my opinion, that Brian Lee Cheriks wanted the credit for getting away with this murder for so long. Like he wanted an accolade for it, that he was smarter than us.
He not only confesses, he confesses in enormous detail. He was fascinated and attracted to Tessa Van Hart. He would order pizzas for the sole purpose of having her bring them.
Thank you. And, it's for you.
Oh my gosh, no, I can't take that.
Yes,
it's too much.
No, you can. You deserve it.
He thought she was so beautiful that he would tip her $20.
Thank you so much. That's really sweet of you.
Yeah.
Here you go. Take care.
His infatuation became an obsession. And when it becomes an obsession, then you want your dream of this event to live. You want to make this happen by whatever means are necessary to make it happen.
So Brian had concocted a plan to lure Tessa out to this abandoned home.
She arrives at this house to just deliver a pizza, and there's Brian Lee Cheriks with a rifle waiting behind the chimney.
He knows Tessa is the only one who delivers late at night because the other employees have gone home. She is driving into a death trap and doesn't know it. She sees a house with a light on in close proximity and decides to walk over there and see if they ordered a pizza. This is his opportunity.
Hey, Tessa! Hey, it's me.
Hi, what are you doing here? Did you order a pizza?
Yeah, but it doesn't matter. I want to talk to you about something.
It's okay. Get back.
Wait! No, I just want to talk something.
He attacks her in the grass, forces her to the ground.
Help! Please, someone! Please don't hurt me. I won't tell anyone.
Damn right you won't.
He assaulted her, sodomized her, the whole time, her begging for her life.
Please, I have kids.
He has his rifle with him. He brought that weapon with him for a reason. He didn't decide that on the way there. That was part of his plan.
And then, for whatever reason, he shot her. She moved after he shot her, so to be sure, he shot her again. How cold-blooded is that?
He then decided he needed to get rid of her. He drags her back to her car, puts her in the back seat, and intends to drive somewhere and abandon the car. He then throws his rifle into the water, knowing that that links him to this crime, and goes on about his life as if nothing happened.
What can I do you for?
Yeah, a slice of cheese?
Sure. That'll be $2.50.
Everybody on this island is talking about nothing else but this crime. And Brian Cherix is right in the middle of all of them.
Thanks, man.
And he's the one responsible for it.
While confessing to the murder, none of it seemed to bother him.
Brian Cherix demonstrates himself to be a totally cold, emotionless monster. Mr. Cherix went to trial. He was found to be responsible by 12 of his peers, and a judge sentenced Mr. Cherix to death.
I was really happy over that one, because I wanted justice served.
In 2004, Brian Lee Cherix was put to death by lethal injection. As his death sentence date approached, Brian Lee Cherix asked that no more appeals be put forward by his attorneys. Perhaps he realized he needed to pay for this heinous crime.
People still talk about what happened in Chincoteague. They still talk about what happened to Tessa Van Hart. Closure is always a word we love to throw out there. Closure is a difficult thing when you lose your loved one, especially in a horrendous way, such as what happened in this murder. It literally changed their way of life. It made them think twice about who was roaming their streets and what they should do to protect themselves and their families.
That community suffered. They still suffer. They still suffer. They think about it all the time. How did one of their own turn on another one of their own? The eternal question that no one can answer. They just know that it happens. Her family is tortured by this. Her memory lives on forever. But unfortunately, it's just a memory.
That was my soulmate. And I believe that to this day, and I'll believe that to the day I join her up in heaven, you know. So that's my soulmate. Yeah. She made 2 wonderful kids, and they give me a couple grandkids. And I think she'd be really proud of both of them. And maybe she'd be a little proud of me if I was able to help mold them somewhat to what they are now.
My mom, she did her best with the little time that she had. And tried to carry on a little piece of her. I just want her to be proud. And I hope I'm doing that.
For the 2 to 3 years.
On the morning of April 26, 1999, London was moving exactly as it always did. Buses groaned through narrow streets. Shopkeepers arranged newspapers outside their storefronts. Office workers hurried along pavements with coffee cups warming their hands against the lingering chill of spring. It was the kind of ordinary morning that disappears into memory almost as soon as it happens. And yet, Hidden somewhere within those familiar streets, a mystery was about to be born. By lunchtime, millions of people across Britain would hear a piece of news so shocking that many would remember exactly where they were when they first heard it. Television screens would interrupt routines. Newsrooms would descend into disbelief. Phones would ring endlessly. Journalists would scramble for information they could barely comprehend. One of the most recognizable faces in the country had been murdered. Not in a dark alley. Not during a robbery. Not in some distant corner of the world while covering a dangerous story. She was killed on her own doorstep. In broad daylight. In one of London's most respectable neighborhoods. With a single gunshot. The image remains haunting even decades later. A woman returns home carrying the ordinary concerns of an ordinary day. She reaches for her keys. Perhaps she is already thinking about what comes next. Perhaps her mind is occupied with work, wedding plans, family conversations, or the countless small details that fill a life. Then a figure approaches. A brief encounter. A single moment. One shot. And then silence. The killer disappears. The victim lies motionless before the door she was only seconds away from opening. No struggle. No robbery. No warning. No explanation. Just a mystery. For investigators, it would become one of the most frustrating cases in British criminal history. For journalists, it would become an obsession. For the public, it would become a national wound that never fully healed. And for those who loved her, it would become an endless question that still echoes more than 25 years later. Who wanted Jill Dando dead? The question sounds simple. The answer has never been found. What makes the case so disturbing is not merely the violence itself. Britain had seen murders before. It had seen serial killers, gangland executions, terrorist attacks, and crimes that filled headlines for months. But this case felt different. Because nothing seemed to fit. The victim did not appear to have enemies. The attack was executed with extraordinary precision. The timing seemed deliberate. The location was brazen. And the motive remained invisible. It was as if someone had stepped out of the shadows, completed a carefully planned mission in a matter of seconds, and vanished back into the city before anyone could understand what had happened. Years later, retired detectives would still stare at evidence boards covered with photographs, witness statements, timelines, and forensic reports. They would still ask the same question. Why? Why her? Why there? Why that day? And perhaps most importantly, why was there so little left behind? Most murder investigations begin with something tangible. A jealous partner. A financial dispute. A family conflict. A criminal connection. A witness who saw too much. A mistake that points investigators in the right direction. The murder of Jill Dando offered almost none of those comforts. Instead, it delivered confusion. Imagine standing at the center of a giant maze with dozens of possible paths stretching into darkness. One path suggests an obsessed stalker who spent months studying the routines of a famous television presenter. Another suggests revenge connected to the very crime programs she helped bring into British living rooms. A third hints at political extremism during a turbulent international conflict. Others lead toward conspiracy theories, professional assassins, and possibilities so strange that investigators struggled to separate fact from speculation. Each path appears promising at first. Each eventually fades into uncertainty. The deeper authorities dug, the more elusive the truth seemed to become. Yet before any of those theories emerged, before the newspapers devoted thousands of pages to speculation, before detectives launched one of the largest murder investigations in the history of the Metropolitan Police, there was only a woman. A woman whose smile was familiar to millions. A woman who appeared in homes across Britain almost every day. A woman people trusted. That trust is part of what made the tragedy feel so personal. Many victims of crime are strangers to the wider public. Their stories become headlines for a few days before fading from national attention. Jill Dando was different. People knew her face. They knew her voice. Parents watched her with their children. Grandparents recognized her immediately. She represented something comforting and familiar in British life. The thought that someone could approach her in broad daylight and end her life with such cold efficiency shattered a sense of security many people did not even realize they possessed. If it could happen to her, who was truly safe? As investigators reconstructed the final moments of her life, they encountered a scene that seemed almost cinematic in its simplicity. No dramatic chase. No prolonged confrontation. No desperate struggle for survival. Just a brief sequence of events measured in seconds. The killer's apparent calmness disturbed detectives almost as much as the murder itself. This was not an act of uncontrolled rage. It did not resemble an argument that spiraled into violence. It did not appear impulsive. Everything suggested preparation. Everything suggested intention. Everything suggested that the victim had been selected long before the trigger was pulled. That realization transformed the investigation. Because if the murder was planned, someone somewhere knew why. Someone somewhere carried the answer. The challenge was finding them. The City of London is enormous. Millions of lives intersect every day. People pass each other without exchanging a glance. Strangers share trains, buses, sidewalks, and shops. They appear briefly in each other's stories before disappearing forever. The killer seemed to understand that reality perfectly. In a city built on movement and anonymity, vanishing can be surprisingly easy. Especially if the plan is carefully designed. Especially if fear and confusion delay the first critical minutes after a crime. Especially if witnesses catch only fragments. A face glimpsed for a second. A coat. A direction of travel. A vague memory. Nothing more. The investigation that followed would generate mountains of information. Thousands of witness interviews. Countless forensic examinations. Hours upon hours of surveillance reviews and analytical work. And still, despite all of that effort, certainty remained out of reach. What emerged instead was a story filled with contradictions. A story where evidence seemed promising one year and questionable the next. A story where a man would be convicted, imprisoned, and later acquitted. A story where each apparent breakthrough ultimately reopened old wounds instead of closing them. For many people, the case became less about a murder and more about the unsettling possibility that modern investigative techniques could still fail. That even in an age of forensic science, databases, media coverage, and relentless police work, some crimes remain stubbornly unsolved. Perhaps that is why the mystery continues to fascinate people decades later. Not because of sensationalism. Not because of conspiracy theories. But because unresolved questions have a unique power over the human mind. We crave endings. We seek explanations. We want the pieces to fit together. The murder of Jill Dando refuses to provide that satisfaction. Instead, it leaves us standing before a locked door. On one side lies everything investigators know. On the other side lies the truth. And between them remains a gap that no one has yet managed to cross. As the years passed, memories faded. Witnesses grew older. Streets changed. Businesses closed. New residents moved into old neighborhoods. London continued its endless evolution. But the case endured. Files remained stored in police archives. Documentaries revisited old theories. Journalists re-examined forgotten leads. Former detectives reflected on missed opportunities and unanswered questions. Every so often, public attention returned. A new theory would surface. A forgotten detail would be discussed. An interview would reignite debate. Then the mystery would settle back into silence once more. Yet silence has never erased the central image. A bright spring morning. A quiet residential street. A television presenter returning home. A killer waiting for the perfect moment. And a single gunshot that would echo through British history. This is not merely the story of a famous murder. It is the story of uncertainty. Of a crime that seemed impossible. Of an investigation that stretched across years. Of a nation searching for answers. and of a woman whose final moments remain connected to one of the greatest unsolved mysteries the United Kingdom has ever known. Before we examine the investigation, before we follow detectives through false leads and courtroom battles, before we explore the suspects, theories, and controversies that continue to divide opinion today, we must first travel back to the world that existed before the murder. Back to a Britain approaching the end of the 20th century. Back to a television landscape where a warm smile could make someone feel like a trusted member of the family. Back to the life of Jill Dando herself. Because long before she became the center of a mystery, she was simply living a life that seemed filled with promise. A life moving toward a future she never had the chance to see. And it is there, in that world untouched by tragedy, that our story truly begins. There is a strange irony that appears again and again in the history of true crime. The people whose deaths become the most enduring mysteries are often not those living dangerous lives. They are not gangsters navigating criminal underworlds. They are not politicians surrounded by enemies. They are not figures constantly looking over their shoulders. Instead, they are often people who believe tomorrow will arrive exactly as expected. People making plans. People buying groceries. People scheduling meetings. People discussing weddings, vacations, birthdays, and ordinary futures. And on April 26, 1999, Jill Dando was one of those people. When investigators later attempted to reconstruct the final days of her life, one detail surfaced repeatedly. Nothing appeared wrong. No visible fear. No desperate calls for help. No evidence that she believed she was being hunted. No indication that she expected violence. In fact, the closer detectives examined her life, the more baffling the murder became. Because Jill Dando did not seem like someone standing on the edge of catastrophe. She seemed like someone standing at the beginning of a new chapter. Yet somewhere beyond her awareness, another story was already unfolding. A story moving quietly through the shadows. A story whose ending had already been written. The terrifying aspect of planned violence is that it often exists long before the victim realizes it. A decision is made. A target is selected. Preparations begin. Observation follows. Meanwhile, the intended victim continues living normally. Every smile. Every conversation. Every routine journey. Every ordinary moment. Unaware that someone may be watching. Unaware that someone may be calculating. Unaware that somewhere, a countdown has already started. Whether that is what happened to Jill Dando remains unknown. But decades later, investigators continue to return to that possibility. Because the murder itself displayed a level of confidence that suggested familiarity. The killer did not appear lost. The killer did not appear uncertain. The killer arrived at exactly the right place. At exactly the right time. Then disappeared almost immediately. That sequence raises a chilling possibility. What if the murderer knew far more about Jill's routines than Jill ever knew about the murderer? To understand why that question matters, we have to imagine London in the spring of 1999. This was a city balancing two identities at once. One foot remained firmly planted in the 20th century. The other was stepping toward a new millennium. Mobile phones existed, but they were not yet extensions of human life. Surveillance cameras were becoming more common, but nothing close to the digital networks that cover cities today. Social media did not exist. People left fewer electronic footprints. Movements were harder to track. Memories carried greater importance because technology recorded less. A person could disappear into a crowd much more easily. A witness could overlook a critical detail. A murderer could exploit those gaps. And London offered countless opportunities for someone who understood anonymity. Millions moved through the city every day. Strangers blended together. Faces came and went. The city swallowed details. For detectives investigating the murder, that reality would become one of their greatest frustrations. Because somewhere within those millions of daily interactions, the killer had hidden successfully. Not for hours. Not for days. But for years. As news of the shooting spread across Britain, disbelief traveled almost as quickly as information. Television viewers stared at screens. Radio listeners pulled their cars to the side of roads. Families interrupted conversations. People repeated the same sentence over and over. It couldn't be true. Not her. Not Jill Dando. The shock came from more than recognition. It came from contradiction. The public image of Jill represented safety, professionalism, kindness, reliability. Nothing about her public identity seemed connected to violence. Nothing about her suggested enemies. And yet someone had executed an attack that appeared frighteningly deliberate. That contradiction created a vacuum. And whenever a vacuum exists, speculation rushes in to fill it. Almost immediately, theories began multiplying. Some people imagined an obsessed admirer whose admiration had twisted into something dark and possessive. Others wondered whether her work had unknowingly crossed paths with dangerous individuals. Some suspected organized crime. Others considered political motivations. A few suggested professional assassination. Each theory attempted to solve the same puzzle. How does someone become the target of such a calculated act when no obvious motive exists? The question fascinated the public because it challenged assumptions. Most people believe danger announces itself. We imagine warning signs, threats, arguments, escalating conflicts. The murder of Jill Dando seemed to arrive without any of them. Like a lightning strike from a clear sky. But detectives understood something the public often forgets. The absence of visible warning signs does not mean the absence of danger. Sometimes warning signs exist beyond the victim's view. Sometimes they are hidden within another person's obsession. Sometimes they are buried inside grievances no one else recognizes. Sometimes they exist only in the mind of the offender. And those are often the most difficult crimes to solve. Because investigators must uncover motives that were never openly expressed. They must reconstruct intentions from fragments. They must enter psychological territory where evidence becomes increasingly difficult to find. The murder of Jill Dando forced detectives into exactly that challenge. Imagine arriving at the scene as an investigator. You know the victim. Everyone knows the victim. The entire nation knows the victim. Pressure descends instantly. The media wants answers. The public wants answers. Political leaders want answers. The victim's family wants answers. And yet when you begin searching for those answers, you find uncertainty instead. The murder weapon is gone. The killer is gone. The motive is unclear. Witness descriptions vary. The clock is already ticking. Every passing hour gives the offender more distance. Every passing day increases the possibility that memories will fade. Every passing week allows rumors to grow. The investigation became a race against invisibility. And invisibility is a difficult opponent. Because unlike physical evidence, invisibility leaves nothing to collect. Nothing to photograph. Nothing to analyze in a laboratory. Only absence. Only questions. Only possibilities. Perhaps that is why this case continues to exert such a powerful hold on public imagination. It touches a fear deeper than violence itself. The fear of randomness. The fear that catastrophe can emerge without warning. The fear that some mysteries may never provide closure. For Jill's loved ones, however, the story was never primarily about mystery. It was about loss. Long before the public debated suspects and theories, there were family members struggling to process an impossible reality. There were friends replaying conversations. Colleagues revisiting memories. People who had laughed with her only days earlier. People who had expected to see her again. People who suddenly found themselves living in a world where she no longer existed. Every murder creates two crime scenes. The physical scene investigators examine. And the emotional scene left behind in the lives of those who remain. The second scene is often invisible. No photographs capture it fully. No forensic teams process it. But its effects last much longer. In the months following the murder, Britain focused intensely on finding the killer. That focus was understandable. Justice matters. Truth matters. Accountability matters. Yet beneath the headlines existed quieter suffering. A family forced to mourn publicly. Friends answering endless questions. Loved ones watching strangers discuss theories about someone they knew as a daughter, sister, partner, and friend. The public saw a famous presenter. They saw headlines. Television clips. Photographs. News reports. Those closest to Jill saw something else. They saw unfinished conversations. Future plans that would never happen. A wedding that would never take place. A voice they would never hear again. And while investigators pursued leads across London and beyond, that grief remained constant. Steady. Unchanging. Waiting. Because unlike investigations, grief does not end when newspapers move on. It remains. Year after year. Question after question. Especially when answers never arrive. That reality would become one of the defining tragedies of the Jill Dando case. Not simply that she died. But that certainty died with her. The person who understood the full truth was either the killer, an accomplice if one existed, or perhaps no one except the killer alone. And if that individual chose silence, the truth became trapped. Locked away. Hidden behind years of speculation. As the investigation expanded, detectives began constructing timelines measured down to minutes. They examined routines, movements, relationships, professional responsibilities, travel records, witness accounts. Every detail mattered. Every possibility required consideration. Because somewhere within those details might exist the single thread capable of unraveling the entire mystery. A missed observation. A forgotten encounter. An overlooked connection. A seemingly insignificant event. History has shown that major investigations are sometimes solved through remarkably small discoveries. A receipt. A phone call. A witness who suddenly remembers. A fragment that initially appeared meaningless. Detectives hoped such a fragment existed here. They had to believe it did. The alternative was almost unbearable. The alternative was that a murderer had committed one of Britain's most infamous crimes and vanished without leaving enough behind to identify them. That possibility haunted the investigation from the beginning. And it continues to haunt the case today. Because despite the years that followed, despite arrests, trials, appeals, forensic reviews, documentaries, books, and endless public discussion, one fact remains unchanged. The identity of the person who pulled the trigger has never been conclusively established. Some mysteries fade because people lose interest. This mystery endures because people cannot stop asking the same question. Who was waiting on Gowan Avenue that spring morning? Who approached the front door? Who carried the weapon? Who walked away? And why? The answers remain hidden somewhere beyond reach. But before we enter the investigation itself, before the evidence, before the theories, before the controversy that would eventually surround a suspect named Barry George, we must spend time with the person at the center of the story. Not the victim in a police file. Not the face in newspaper headlines. Not the symbol of an unsolved crime. The woman herself. Because understanding Jill Dando's life is essential to understanding why her death shook an entire nation. And why, even now, more than a quarter of a century later, people continue searching for the truth. There are certain moments in history that seem frozen in place. No matter how many years pass, people continue returning to them. Not because the answers are known, but because the questions remain alive. The murder of Jill Dando is one of those moments. More than 25 years have passed since that spring morning in West London, yet the image remains astonishingly vivid. A quiet residential street. A familiar face. A single gunshot. A killer who appeared and disappeared with such precision that even now, decades later, investigators cannot say with certainty who was responsible. Most unsolved murders eventually drift toward obscurity. Evidence grows old. Witnesses disappear. Public interest fades. New tragedies replace old ones. But some cases refuse to die. They linger. They settle into the national consciousness. They become stories people tell years later, often beginning with the same phrase. Do you remember where you were when you heard? For many people in Britain, the death of Jill Dando became exactly that kind of memory. A permanent marker in time. A dividing line between before and after. Before the news broke. After the news broke. Before she was a victim. After she became a mystery. Yet perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the entire case is how normal everything appeared beforehand. There was no dramatic countdown visible to the public. No escalating conflict dominating newspaper headlines. No widely known threat hanging over her life. No indication that one of Britain's most beloved television personalities was moving toward a violent and unexplained death. The future appeared open. Bright. Predictable. Safe. And perhaps that is why the case continues to disturb people on such a profound level. Because it challenges one of our most comforting assumptions. The belief that danger can be recognized before it arrives. The belief that catastrophe leaves footprints. The belief that terrible events announce themselves. The murder of Jill Dando seemed to reject all of those ideas. Instead, it arrived suddenly. Without warning. Without explanation. Without mercy. Somewhere in London, a person woke up on the morning of April 26, 1999, already carrying knowledge nobody else possessed. A secret. A plan. An intention. Perhaps that individual checked the time repeatedly. Perhaps they rehearsed what would happen. Perhaps they experienced fear. Perhaps excitement. Perhaps nothing at all. We do not know. That uncertainty forms the dark heart of this story. Because every investigation that followed was essentially an attempt to travel backward through time and reconstruct what existed inside the killer's mind. To understand motive. To understand preparation. To understand choice. Why Jill Dando? Why that day? Why that location? Why a single shot? Why leave so little behind? These questions would eventually consume detectives, journalists, forensic experts, prosecutors, defense lawyers, documentary filmmakers, and amateur investigators around the world. Each generation examining the case has arrived at its own theories. Each generation believes it may finally possess the missing piece. And yet the puzzle remains incomplete. There is something almost haunting about that reality. The idea that a crime so public could remain so mysterious. The idea that one of the largest murder investigations in British history could still leave fundamental questions unanswered. The idea that somewhere, hidden among decades of evidence, interviews, reports, and speculation, the truth may still be waiting. Or perhaps worse. Perhaps the truth has already vanished. Lost forever with memories that were never shared. Witnesses who never came forward. Evidence that was overlooked. Opportunities that existed for only a moment before disappearing. That possibility troubles many former investigators. Because every unsolved case contains a ghost. Not the ghost of the victim. But the ghost of the answer that almost surfaced. The witness who nearly noticed something important. The clue that nearly connected. The lead that nearly succeeded. The murder of Jill Dando contains many such ghosts. Moments that seem significant. Details that appear meaningful. Paths that looked promising. Only to dissolve under closer examination. And so the mystery survives. Year after year. Question after question. Theory after theory. Yet behind all of the speculation exists a simple human truth. A life ended. A family suffered. A future disappeared. Sometimes famous cases become consumed by their own mythology. The mystery becomes larger than the victim. The theories become more prominent than the person whose death created them. That is why it is important to remember what existed before the headlines. Before the police cordons. Before the courtroom battles. Before the newspaper front pages. There was a woman building a life. A daughter. A sister. A colleague. A friend. A fiancé. A person with plans extending far beyond April 1999. The public often remembers Jill Dando as a television presenter. That is understandable. Millions of people knew her through their screens. They recognized her smile instantly. They associated her with trust, with professionalism, with familiarity. But television was only one part of her identity. Beyond the cameras existed an ordinary human life filled with the same hopes and concerns shared by countless others. The tragedy is that those ordinary hopes were never allowed to become reality. Instead, her story became permanently linked to one of the most perplexing criminal investigations Britain has ever known. As months turned into years, the case acquired an almost legendary status. Newspapers revisited it repeatedly. Television documentaries explored competing theories. Former detectives offered reflections. Writers produced books. Experts debated evidence. The public continued searching for answers. Yet despite all that attention, one fact remained stubbornly unchanged. Nobody could conclusively explain what happened on Gowan Avenue. That absence of certainty transformed the murder into something larger than a criminal investigation. It became a symbol. A reminder that even sophisticated forensic science has limits. A reminder that human memory is imperfect. A reminder that truth can remain hidden despite enormous effort. In many ways, the Jill Dando case stands at the intersection of two competing narratives. One narrative speaks of progress, of modern policing, of technological advancement, of increasingly powerful investigative tools. The other narrative speaks of mystery, of uncertainty, of questions that refuse to surrender their answers. The case belongs to both stories simultaneously. That contradiction is part of what makes it so compelling. The investigation would eventually produce suspects, evidence, arrests, trials, convictions, appeals, acquittals, and controversy. Yet even after all those developments, certainty remained elusive. The deeper people looked, the more complicated the picture became. Like a fog that thickens instead of clearing. Like a maze whose pathways multiply instead of narrowing. Like a story that grows stranger with every attempt to explain it. But all of that lies ahead. The courtroom arguments. The forensic debates. The investigative breakthroughs and disappointments. The theories involving stalkers, revenge, politics, and professional killers. The countless hours detectives spent pursuing answers. Those chapters cannot be understood without first understanding the world that existed before the crime. Because every murder investigation begins with a life. And before Jill Dando became the subject of one of Britain's most famous unsolved mysteries, she was living that life. Building a career. Making plans. Looking toward the future. The contrast between that future and what actually happened is what gives this story its emotional weight. It is not merely a mystery. It is a collision. A collision between expectation and reality. Between safety and violence. Between ordinary life and extraordinary tragedy. The morning of April 26th did not begin as a historic day. It did not feel significant. Nobody walking through Fulham understood that the neighborhood would soon become known around the world. Nobody passing through the streets could have imagined that a crime committed in mere seconds would still be discussed decades later. History often works that way. Its most important moments rarely announce themselves. They arrive quietly, hidden within ordinary hours, disguised as routine. Then, suddenly, everything changes. And once it changes, nothing can be restored to the way it was before. For Jill's family, that change would be permanent. For investigators, it would become a professional challenge lasting years. For the British public, it would become one of the most enduring mysteries of a generation. And for the unknown person responsible, it would become a secret carried through the passage of time. A secret still protected by silence. Whether that silence belongs to a lone killer, an accomplice, or circumstances that may never be fully understood remains one of the central questions of the case. But every mystery must begin somewhere. Not at the moment of death. At the moment of life. At the point where the victim's story truly starts. Because to understand why the nation mourned Jill Dando, we must first understand who she was before she became a headline. Before detectives studied timelines. Before journalists filled front pages. Before courtrooms debated evidence. Before theories multiplied across decades. We must go back to the beginning. Back to the young woman who grew up far from the chaos that would one day surround her name. Back to the journey that transformed her into one of Britain's most trusted television personalities. Back to the life that made her death so shocking. And it is there, in that life, that the next chapter of our story begins. Long before her name became attached to one of Britain's most haunting unsolved mysteries, long before detectives pinned photographs to investigation boards and reporters crowded outside police headquarters searching for answers. Jill Dando was simply a little girl growing up in a quiet English town. To understand why her death shook an entire nation, it is necessary to understand the life that came before it. Because the tragedy of Jill Dando was not only that she died. It was that so many people felt they knew her. And in many ways, they did. The story begins in Weston-super-Mare, a seaside town in Somerset, southwest England. It was the kind of place where life moved at a gentler pace than London. The sea air drifted through the streets. Families knew one another. Small routines shaped everyday life. It was a community where people often remained connected for years, sometimes generations. Jill Wendy Dando was born on November 9, 1961. From the beginning, there was little indication that she would one day become one of the most recognizable faces on British television. There was no prophecy. No dramatic prediction. No childhood fame. Instead, there was a family home filled with ordinary hopes and ordinary dreams. Those who knew Jill during her early years often remembered a young girl who possessed a natural warmth. She was bright without being arrogant. Friendly without trying to dominate attention. She had an ability to make people feel comfortable, a quality that would later become one of the defining characteristics of her broadcasting career. Even as a child, she displayed curiosity about the world around her. Not the loud curiosity that demands attention. The quieter kind. The kind that listens carefully. The kind that asks questions. The kind that remembers details. Years later, viewers across Britain would see that same quality every time she appeared on screen. But at the time, she was simply another girl growing up near the coast, surrounded by family and friends. The Britain of Jill's childhood was very different from the Britain that would exist when she became famous. Television was changing. Society was changing. The country was evolving through economic uncertainty, political shifts, and cultural transformation. Yet in many ways, Weston-super-Mare remained insulated from the frantic pace of larger cities. Life there still revolved around community, school, family, work, simple routines. And Jill appeared to thrive within that environment. Teachers remembered her as intelligent and diligent. Friends described her as approachable. Not the type of person who sought the spotlight for its own sake. That detail would become important later. Because unlike some television personalities who aggressively pursued fame, Jill's rise often seemed driven by professionalism rather than ambition alone. She wanted to do her job well. Recognition followed naturally. As she moved through adolescence, those around her began noticing traits that would eventually define her public image. She was composed, reliable, hardworking, the kind of person others trusted, the kind of person people instinctively turned toward rather than away from. Trust is a difficult quality to manufacture. Television executives spend fortunes trying to create it. Politicians spend careers trying to earn it. Most never succeed completely. Jill seemed to possess it effortlessly. Perhaps because it was genuine. Perhaps because audiences sensed authenticity beneath the polished presentation. Whatever the reason, it would later become one of her greatest strengths. But first she had to find her path. Like many young people, Jill's future was not immediately obvious. The road toward broadcasting was not neatly mapped out before her. She was not born into media connections. She did not emerge from an elite network of influential contacts. Her journey would be built gradually, step by step, opportunity by opportunity, mistake by mistake, success by success. After completing her education, Jill entered journalism through local newspapers. The work was far removed from the bright lights of national television. There were no celebrity interviews, no major broadcasts, no millions of viewers. Instead, there were local stories, community events, council meetings, human interest pieces, the foundational work of journalism. For many reporters, these assignments can feel mundane. For Jill, they became training. She learned how to communicate clearly, how to gather information, how to earn trust, how to tell stories that mattered to ordinary people. These lessons would remain with her throughout her career. The best broadcasters often understand that every major story is ultimately about people. Not statistics. Not headlines. People. Jill seemed to grasp that instinctively. Colleagues who worked with her during those early years frequently spoke about her professionalism. She arrived prepared. She worked hard. She treated others respectfully. In industries where ego often flourishes, those qualities stood out. Gradually, opportunities expanded. Local journalism led toward regional broadcasting. Regional broadcasting opened doors to larger audiences. Each step required adjustment. Each step required confidence. And each step revealed that Jill possessed a remarkable ability to connect with viewers. Television can be deceptive. Many assume it rewards beauty or charisma alone. In reality, viewers are extraordinarily sensitive to authenticity. They notice discomfort. They sense insincerity. They recognize when someone is performing rather than communicating. Jill's success came partly because she seemed comfortable being herself. Her on-screen presence felt natural. Not forced. Not theatrical. Just genuine. That quality became increasingly valuable as her career advanced. Throughout the 1980s, British television was evolving rapidly. Competition increased. Audience expectations changed. Broadcasters searched constantly for personalities capable of attracting and retaining viewers. Jill proved she could do exactly that. One opportunity led to another. Another led to national exposure. And before long, she was moving steadily toward the upper levels of British broadcasting. For her family and friends, the transformation was remarkable. The girl from Weston-super-Mare was becoming a national figure. Yet those closest to her often remarked on something equally important. Fame did not seem to change her. Success can alter people in subtle ways. It can create distance. It can inflate egos. It can transform relationships. But acquaintances repeatedly described Jill as grounded. The same warmth that characterized her childhood remained visible. The same approachability endured. The same kindness persisted. Those traits became central to her reputation. By the early 1990s, Jill Dando had become increasingly familiar to television audiences throughout Britain. Viewers welcomed her into their homes regularly. Her face appeared during breakfast programs, news broadcasts, and special reports. With each appearance, public affection grew. Television occupies a unique place in society. Unlike film stars, television presenters often become part of daily routines. People see them repeatedly. Week after week. Year after year. Eventually they begin to feel familiar. Almost like distant friends. Jill became one of those figures. A trusted presence. A reassuring voice. Someone associated with reliability and professionalism. As her career accelerated, opportunities multiplied. Yet despite her growing prominence, she retained an unusual relatability. Viewers admired her success without feeling alienated by it. That balance is rare. Many public figures inspire admiration. Fewer inspire affection. Jill seemed to inspire both. Behind the scenes, her work ethic remained intense. Success rarely arrives accidentally. The polished broadcasts visible to audiences represented countless unseen hours. Preparation, research, meetings, travel, long days, constant pressure. Television careers can be demanding, particularly at the national level. Mistakes occur publicly. Criticism arrives quickly. Competition never disappears. Jill navigated those challenges with professionalism that impressed colleagues throughout the industry. Producers trusted her. Executives valued her. Journalists respected her. The reputation she built extended far beyond her public image. Within the media world, she was known as someone who approached work seriously while treating others decently. That combination strengthened her career even further. As the decade progressed, her profile continued rising. New opportunities emerged. Larger programs followed. More viewers recognized her. More responsibilities arrived. And through it all, she seemed to manage success with remarkable composure. To outside observers, her life appeared increasingly ideal. A successful career. Public admiration. Professional respect. Financial stability. Yet there was still more ahead. By the late 1990s, Jill Dando would achieve a level of recognition few broadcasters ever experience. She would become one of the most trusted and beloved personalities in British television. A household name. A familiar face to millions. The type of presenter viewers felt they could rely upon. The type of person whose presence seemed woven into the fabric of everyday life. And perhaps that is why what happened later felt so impossible. Because when people looked at Jill Dando, they saw someone who represented stability, normalcy, trust. The very opposite of violence. The very opposite of danger. No one looking at her remarkable rise from a seaside town to national prominence could have imagined that her story would one day become inseparable from one of the greatest mysteries in British criminal history. At that point, however, the future still appeared bright. The darkest chapter had not yet begun. The headlines had not yet been written. The investigation had not yet started. Jill Dando was simply continuing the journey she had spent decades building. A journey that seemed destined for even greater success. And as the 1990s approached their end, her life appeared to be entering its happiest and most promising period yet. By the mid-1990s, Jill Dando had achieved something that very few television personalities ever managed to accomplish. She was famous. But more importantly, she was trusted. The distinction mattered. Fame can be created by controversy. Trust cannot. Fame can appear overnight. Trust is earned slowly. Fame attracts attention. Trust creates connection. And Jill had become one of the most trusted faces in Britain. Every day, millions of viewers invited her into their homes through television screens. They watched her report the news. They listened to her interviews. They followed programs she presented. Over time, her presence became woven into the routines of everyday life. For many viewers, seeing Jill on television felt reassuring. She projected calmness, professionalism, confidence without arrogance, warmth without artificiality. In an industry often driven by personality and competition, those qualities made her stand out. The BBC recognized that value. So did audiences. Her career continued climbing. Program after program expanded her public profile. Yet unlike many rising stars, Jill did not cultivate an image built around glamour or celebrity culture. She remained approachable, grounded, relatable. The girl from Weston-super-Mare never seemed entirely replaced by the television presenter known throughout the country. That authenticity became one of the foundations of her popularity. Colleagues often described her as remarkably easy to work with. No dramatic outbursts. No inflated ego. No sense that success had transformed her into someone unrecognizable. Behind the scenes, she treated production staff, researchers, assistants, and technicians with the same respect she showed executives and fellow presenters. Small details like those may not attract headlines, but they shape reputations. And Jill's reputation inside the television industry was exceptionally strong. People liked her. Not because they were expected to. Because they genuinely did. That distinction would become painfully significant after her death. When someone controversial dies, reactions are often mixed. When Jill Dando was murdered, grief appeared almost universal. The response came not only from viewers but also from colleagues who had worked alongside her for years. Many struggled to reconcile the person they knew with the violent circumstances surrounding her death. The contradiction felt impossible. As her career expanded, one particular role elevated her public profile even further. Crime Watch. For viewers outside Britain, it may be difficult to fully appreciate the significance of the program. Crime Watch was not merely entertainment. It served a practical purpose. The show reconstructed real criminal cases and appealed directly to the public for information. Witnesses frequently came forward after broadcasts. Suspects were identified. Cases were solved. The program occupied a unique position somewhere between journalism, public service, and criminal investigation. Its success depended heavily on public trust. Viewers needed to believe the presenters were sincere, credible, professional. Jill fit that role naturally. When she became associated with Crime Watch, millions of people saw her as part of the effort to help victims and assist law enforcement. Ironically, years later, some investigators and commentators would wonder whether that very association somehow contributed to her death. Could she have unknowingly attracted the attention of a dangerous criminal? Could someone have blamed her for an arrest? Could resentment toward the program have transformed into violence? Those questions would emerge later. At the time, however, Crime Watch represented another achievement in a flourishing career. The future looked increasingly promising. Jill was entering the period many broadcasters dream about. Established enough to enjoy national recognition. Young enough to anticipate decades of additional success. Respected enough to choose among opportunities. She appeared to have found an ideal balance between professional accomplishment and personal happiness. And outside television, important changes were happening as well. The late 1990s marked a particularly joyful period in Jill's private life. She had become engaged. Friends noticed the difference. Not because she suddenly transformed into a different person. Because she seemed genuinely happy. There was excitement about the future. Wedding plans. Shared ambitions. The ordinary but meaningful conversations that accompany serious commitment. The prospect of marriage represented something deeply personal amid the public demands of a high-profile career. For someone whose face was recognized by millions, private happiness carried special value. Television viewers saw the presenter. Friends and family saw the woman building a future. And by all accounts, that future appeared bright. It is impossible to discuss Jill's final years without acknowledging how hopeful they seemed. This is one reason the tragedy feels especially heartbreaking. There were plans. There was momentum. There was optimism. Her story did not feel like one approaching a conclusion. It felt like one approaching a new beginning. Many victims in true crime narratives are remembered primarily through the circumstances of their deaths. Jill's case is different. People who knew her consistently return to descriptions of her life. Her kindness. Her humor. Her professionalism. Her generosity. The fact that these qualities appear repeatedly across interviews and recollections suggests something meaningful. Different people from different parts of her life often described remarkably similar characteristics. That consistency is difficult to fake. It indicates a genuine personality rather than a carefully manufactured public image. In television, image management is common. Presenters learn how to appear confident, friendly, engaging. But eventually the private reality becomes visible to colleagues. The longer a career lasts, the harder it becomes to maintain a false persona. Jill's positive reputation endured because those who worked closely with her generally found the public image accurate. She truly was the person audiences believed they were watching. That authenticity deepened the national reaction when tragedy struck. People were not mourning an abstract celebrity. They were mourning someone they felt they knew. Someone who seemed familiar. Someone who represented the better qualities of public life. As Britain approached the year 2000, Jill stood among the country's most recognizable media figures. Her career was thriving. Her personal life appeared fulfilling. Her future looked secure. If someone had predicted what would happen in April 1999, almost nobody would have believed it. The idea would have seemed absurd. A famous television presenter assassinated outside her own home? In broad daylight? Without an obvious motive? It sounded more like the plot of a crime drama than a real event. Yet reality often ignores probability. Some of history's most shocking crimes are shocking precisely because they seem so unlikely. The murder of Jill Dando belongs firmly in that category. But before violence entered the story, there was routine. Ordinary routine. The kind that fills most lives. Television appearances. Professional obligations. Meetings. Travel. Family conversations. Wedding plans. Friends. Work. Life moving forward. Looking back from the present, there is an almost painful normality to those final months. Nothing appears dramatic. Nothing suggests imminent danger. Nothing indicates that detectives would soon spend years dissecting every aspect of her existence. The ordinary details become heartbreaking because they were never supposed to become evidence. A conversation was just a conversation. A journey was just a journey. A plan was just a plan. Only after tragedy struck did those moments acquire greater significance. Only afterward did investigators begin asking questions about routines, habits, schedules, and relationships. Searching for clues. Searching for patterns. Searching for explanations. At the center of all that scrutiny remained a simple reality. Jill Dando was living a life that appeared remarkably successful. Not perfect. No life is. But successful by nearly any reasonable measure. She had achieved professional recognition. She had earned public respect. She had meaningful relationships. She had hopes for the future. And she seemed genuinely optimistic about what lay ahead. That optimism forms one of the most tragic elements of the case. Because the audience already knows something she did not. The future she imagined would never arrive. The plans she discussed would remain unfinished. The milestones she anticipated would never occur. Unknown to her, the final chapter of her life was approaching. Somewhere beyond public view, events were moving toward a collision. Whether that collision involved obsession, revenge, political extremism, or motives still undiscovered remains one of the great mysteries of the case. But what matters at this stage of the story is understanding the contrast. The contrast between expectation and reality. Between promise and tragedy. Between the life Jill was building and the fate waiting ahead. As April 1999 approached, she remained focused on work, relationships, and the future. Nothing publicly suggested fear. Nothing publicly suggested danger. Nothing publicly suggested that one ordinary spring morning would change British criminal history forever. The nation saw a woman at the height of her success. A respected broadcaster. A trusted public figure. A fiancé looking forward to marriage. A professional looking forward to the next stage of her career. Everything appeared to be moving in the right direction. And that is exactly what makes the next chapter so devastating. Because history often delivers its greatest tragedies at moments when life seems most secure. The people involved are not preparing for disaster. They are preparing for tomorrow. And on the evening before April 26, 1999, Jill Dando believed she had many tomorrows still ahead of her. She had no reason to think otherwise. No reason to imagine that within hours, her name would become known around the world for a reason nobody could have anticipated. No reason to suspect that her final ordinary day had already begun. The final weeks before April 26, 1999, passed with the quiet rhythm of a life that seemed firmly on course. There were no public signs of fear. No visible indications that Jill Dando believed she was in danger. No dramatic incidents that later investigators could point to and declare, that was the warning. Instead, what emerges from accounts of that period is something far more ordinary. Work schedules, professional commitments, telephone calls, meetings, visits with friends and family, wedding discussions, plans stretching months and years into the future. The normal architecture of a life being actively lived. When detectives later began reconstructing her final days, they were searching for cracks beneath that surface. A threat overlooked. A suspicious encounter. An unusual conversation. Anything that might explain why one of Britain's most recognizable television presenters would become the victim of an execution-style shooting. Yet the deeper they looked, the more elusive that explanation became. This was one of the first major obstacles facing the investigation. Motive usually leaves traces. Anger leaves traces. Jealousy leaves traces. Revenge leaves traces. Even obsession often leaves traces. Letters. Phone calls. Sightings. Warnings. Behavior that appears unusual once examined in retrospect. But Jill's life did not immediately offer investigators a clear path toward any of those explanations. Instead, they found a woman whose future seemed increasingly promising. By 1999, she had become one of the most familiar faces in British broadcasting. Her reputation extended far beyond television studios. She was frequently involved in charitable work. Colleagues admired her professionalism. Viewers appreciated her warmth. Journalists respected her credibility. There are many kinds of public figures. Some attract attention through controversy. Others through charisma. Others through power. Jill occupied a different category. She inspired trust. That quality may sound simple, but it is surprisingly rare. Millions of people recognized her face. Yet very few people had anything negative to say about her. Again and again, descriptions converged around similar themes. Kindness. Professionalism. Reliability. Decency. Those characteristics became central to how the public understood her. And perhaps that is why the murder felt so deeply unsettling. Violence often becomes easier for people to process when they can identify conflict. When they can point toward an obvious enemy. When they can construct a narrative that explains what happened. The murder of Jill Dando resisted those narratives. The victim appeared beloved. The motive appeared absent. The killer appeared invisible. Together, those elements created a mystery that felt almost impossible to comprehend. As spring arrived in London, daily life continued as normal. The city itself was in motion, as always. Millions of journeys. Millions of conversations. Millions of lives intersecting briefly before separating again. London has a peculiar ability to make people feel both connected and anonymous at the same time. Someone can become nationally famous while remaining just another face in a crowd. Jill understood that reality better than most. Although she was a celebrity, she still moved through the ordinary spaces of everyday life. Neighborhood streets. Shops. Restaurants. Train stations. The familiar locations that formed part of her routine. To the public, she existed primarily on television. In reality, she lived much like everyone else. She visited friends. Made plans. Ran errands. Enjoyed quiet moments away from cameras. The distinction matters because it helps explain one of the central mysteries of the case. The person murdered on April 26 was not standing under studio lights. She was not attending a public event. She was not surrounded by security. She was simply returning home. That fact would shape many of the theories that emerged afterward. Because whoever carried out the attack appeared to know exactly where and when to find her. Whether that knowledge came from long-term observation, careful planning, coincidence, or some other source remains unknown. But investigators would spend years attempting to answer that question. The closer they examined Jill's life, the more they became interested in routine. Routine reveals patterns. Patterns reveal opportunities. And opportunities sometimes reveal offenders. When did she leave home? Where did she go? Who knew her schedule? Who interacted with her regularly? Who might have watched without attracting attention? These questions would eventually become central to the investigation. Yet at the time, they remained invisible. To Jill, those routines were simply part of everyday life. Like most people, she likely never imagined that ordinary habits could someday become evidence in a murder inquiry. One of the most tragic aspects of many criminal investigations is how they transform mundane details into objects of intense scrutiny. A casual conversation becomes significant. A brief encounter becomes important. An ordinary journey becomes a critical timeline. Life is suddenly re-examined through the lens of catastrophe. The Jill Dando investigation would do exactly that. Every available detail became relevant. Every movement mattered. Every memory was revisited. But before the tragedy occurred, there was no reason for anyone to view those moments differently. Friends remembered conversations about the future. Family members remembered plans. Colleagues remembered professional commitments. Nothing suggested that they were participating in final interactions. Nothing suggested they were approaching a permanent goodbye. That absence of warning continues to haunt the case. Human beings often search for meaning in retrospect. We look backward hoping to identify signs we missed. A clue. A signal. A moment that could have changed everything. Yet many people close to Jill struggled to find such moments. The future appeared open. The future appeared stable. The future appeared hopeful. And perhaps nowhere was that hope more visible than in her personal life. Her engagement represented more than a romantic milestone. It symbolized a new beginning. Marriage carries with it a vision of tomorrow. Shared plans. Shared goals. Shared expectations. Friends later recalled a woman looking forward rather than backward. A woman excited about what came next. That image makes the events of April 26 feel even more heartbreaking. Because the contrast is so stark. One moment, a future filled with possibility. The next, a mystery that would endure for decades. As the final weekend before the murder approached, London enjoyed the gradual arrival of spring. Trees were beginning to show new growth. Parks attracted families and couples. The long darkness of winter was giving way to brighter days. There is something especially cruel about tragedies that occur during seasons associated with renewal. Spring symbolizes beginnings, growth, optimism, life. The murder of Jill Dando would transform one spring morning into something entirely different. But that transformation had not yet occurred. For now, life continued. People followed routines. Appointments were kept. Conversations unfolded. The city moved forward hour by hour. Somewhere within that city, however, another timeline may have been developing. A hidden timeline. One invisible to everyone except the person responsible. This possibility continues to fascinate investigators. Because the murder itself displayed characteristics that suggested preparation. The killer appeared at the right place. At the right time. Then vanished. Such precision raises uncomfortable questions. How much planning occurred beforehand? How long had the victim been observed? Was the attack organized days in advance? Weeks? Months? Or was it something entirely different? The lack of definitive answers has fueled debate for decades. Some investigators believed the crime reflected careful surveillance. Others remained less certain. What everyone agreed upon, however, was that the execution of the attack seemed remarkably efficient. That efficiency would become one of the defining features of the case. The image of a killer emerging briefly, carrying out the shooting, and disappearing into London remains deeply unsettling. Especially because no clear explanation followed. As the evening of April 25 arrived, Jill Dando had no reason to believe she was entering the final hours of her life. The following day contained ordinary expectations. Routine obligations. Routine plans. Routine responsibilities. Like millions of people, she expected tomorrow to arrive. And it did. The sun rose over London. Traffic filled the roads. Shops opened their doors. Commuters began their journeys. Nothing appeared unusual. Nothing appeared historic. Nothing appeared dangerous. The city woke as it always had. Yet history often hides itself within ordinary mornings. The events that later define generations rarely announce their arrival. They begin quietly. A person leaves home. A journey starts. A decision is made. A stranger waits. Then a single moment changes everything. For Jill Dando, that moment was now approaching. Minute by minute. Street by street. Without her knowledge. Without the knowledge of those who loved her. Without the knowledge of the millions who would soon learn her name in a completely different context. The successful broadcaster. The trusted presenter. The beloved public figure. All of those identities still existed. But within hours, another identity would be added. Victim. And once that happened, one of the most baffling investigations in British criminal history would begin. The questions that continue to echo today had not yet been asked. The theories had not yet been formed. The suspects had not yet been identified. The courtroom battles had not yet been fought. All of that remained in the future. For now, there was only a woman moving through an ordinary day, unaware that her story was about to intersect with a mystery that would outlive decades. A mystery that would survive arrests, convictions, appeals, acquittals, documentaries, books, and endless public debate. A mystery that remains unresolved even now. And it all began with a seemingly ordinary Monday morning in West London. A morning that started like countless others. A morning that nobody expected to remember. A morning that would soon become one of the most infamous dates in modern British criminal history. The day had arrived. And somewhere, whether driven by obsession, revenge, ideology, or motives still hidden from the world, someone was already moving toward the encounter that would change everything. Before she became the victim at the center of a national mystery, Jill Dando was a person defined by something remarkably simple. People liked being around her. That may sound insignificant at first. Yet in an age when public figures are often remembered for controversy, ambition, or scandal, the memories left behind by Jill are striking because of their consistency. Again and again, those who knew her described the same qualities. Kindness. Warmth. Humility. Professionalism. Not because they were searching for flattering words after her death. Because those were the traits they genuinely remembered. In the years following the murder, journalists interviewed family members, colleagues, friends, producers, fellow presenters, and people who had crossed paths with Jill throughout different stages of her life. What emerged was not the portrait of a celebrity obsessed with fame. Nor was it the portrait of someone consumed by power or status. Instead, it was the portrait of a woman who never entirely lost touch with the ordinary values that shaped her upbringing. Perhaps that is why the public felt such a strong connection to her. She seemed real. Not manufactured. Not distant. Not unreachable. When viewers watched her on television, they did not feel as though they were looking at someone from another world. They felt as though they were watching someone they might actually know. Someone who could be a friend. A neighbor. A colleague. Someone familiar. Trust is one of the most valuable currencies in broadcasting. Viewers can sense when a presenter is reading words. They can also sense when a presenter believes them. Jill possessed an unusual ability to communicate sincerity through a camera lens. It is a skill difficult to teach and impossible to fake for long. The camera magnifies dishonesty. It exposes insincerity. Yet year after year, audiences continued responding positively to Jill. Because she never appeared to be performing a version of herself. She simply appeared to be herself. That authenticity helped transform her from a successful presenter into something more significant. A national figure. By the late 1990s, millions of people across Britain recognized her instantly. Yet fame had never been the goal. Those who worked with Jill often noted that she remained focused on the work itself. Preparation mattered. Accuracy mattered. Professionalism mattered. The attention that followed was merely a consequence. Television viewers often see only the final result. The polished broadcast. The confident smile. The effortless delivery. What they do not see are the hours spent researching stories, reviewing scripts, attending meetings, and preparing for interviews. Jill approached those responsibilities seriously. Colleagues frequently remarked upon her reliability. If she promised something, she delivered. If she accepted an assignment, she prepared thoroughly. If she arrived on set, producers knew they could depend on her. Those qualities may not sound dramatic, but they are often what separate respected professionals from temporary celebrities. Jill earned respect because she consistently demonstrated competence. And competence creates trust. Outside the workplace, however, another side of Jill existed. The side known only to family and close friends. The side that never appeared fully on television screens. The side that becomes especially important when trying to understand who someone truly was. Family members remembered her sense of humor. Friends remembered her generosity. Not grand gestures designed to attract attention. Small acts. Thoughtful acts. The kinds of things people do when they genuinely care about others. A phone call. A letter. A favor. A conversation. The details varied. The pattern remained the same. Jill invested in relationships. She valued people. Those closest to her often described a woman who listened carefully. Someone interested in other people's lives. Someone who remembered details. Someone who made others feel important. In many ways, these qualities mirrored the skills that made her effective as a journalist and presenter. Curiosity. Empathy. Communication. The ability to connect. These characteristics existed long before television audiences discovered her. They were part of her personality. Part of the person beneath the public image. That distinction matters. Because true crime stories can sometimes reduce victims to the circumstances of their deaths. A person becomes known primarily through a tragedy. Their individuality slowly disappears beneath headlines and investigation files. The Jill Dando case presents that risk. For many people born after her death, her name is associated first with the mystery. The unsolved murder. The controversial investigation. The endless speculation. Yet before all of that, there was an actual life. A rich and meaningful life. A life filled with ordinary joys and challenges. A life that deserves to be remembered independently of its tragic ending. One of the most revealing aspects of Jill's character was her relationship with fame itself. Many people spend years chasing public recognition. Once they achieve it, they become dependent upon it. Jill never appeared entirely comfortable with celebrity culture. She appreciated professional success. She enjoyed her work. But she did not seem interested in becoming larger than life. Friends often described her as surprisingly down-to-earth considering her level of fame. She remained connected to family. Connected to old friends. Connected to the values that shaped her long before national recognition arrived. That grounded nature made her particularly relatable. Audiences could admire her without feeling intimidated by her success. She represented achievement without arrogance. Ambition without ruthlessness. Confidence without ego. Such combinations are rare. And they help explain why public affection for her remained so strong. As her career advanced, Jill became increasingly involved in charitable causes. Again, this reflected a pattern rather than an isolated event. Helping others appeared important to her. Not as a public relations exercise. Not as a strategy. But as a genuine expression of personal values. People often reveal their priorities through actions rather than words. By that measure, Jill repeatedly demonstrated concern for others. This commitment further strengthened her public image. But perhaps more importantly, it reinforced the impressions held by those who knew her personally. The woman seen by viewers and the woman known by friends seemed remarkably similar. There was little separation between public persona and private character. For a television personality, that level of consistency is unusual. The media industry can encourage performance, image management, carefully constructed identities. Yet people who spent years working alongside Jill rarely described two different versions of her. They described one. The same person on camera and off. The same warmth. The same professionalism. The same kindness. As the 1990s progressed, her reputation continued growing. She became one of the most respected figures within British broadcasting. Not simply because she was talented. Because she was trusted. The distinction is important. Talent attracts audiences. Trust creates loyalty. Millions of viewers trusted Jill Dando. Millions believed her. Millions welcomed her presence. That trust would later amplify the national shock following her death. Because violence against a trusted figure feels intensely personal. People may never have met her. They may never have spoken to her. Yet they felt connected to her. And when she was taken away, that connection transformed into grief. At the same time, Jill's personal life appeared increasingly happy. Friends noticed optimism. Excitement. A sense that the future contained wonderful possibilities. Her engagement brought joy not only to her but also to those around her. People discussed weddings, plans, dreams. The future seemed tangible, close enough to touch. This period of happiness stands in painful contrast to what would happen later. Because everything appeared to be moving in the right direction. Professionally, personally, emotionally. Life was not perfect. No life ever is. But it was good. Meaningfully good. And perhaps that is the greatest tragedy of all. The story was not approaching an ending. It was approaching a beginning. A new chapter. A new phase. A future filled with possibility. Nobody close to Jill believed they were nearing a farewell. Nobody imagined their conversations might become final memories. Nobody expected ordinary moments to become precious because there would be no more. Yet that is often how tragedy works. It arrives without permission. Without warning. Without fairness. One day becomes the last day. One conversation becomes the final conversation. One goodbye becomes permanent. Looking back now, with the knowledge of everything that followed, it is tempting to search for signs. Warnings. Hints. Evidence that the future catastrophe could somehow have been predicted. But those who knew Jill generally saw none. They saw a woman enjoying life. Building a future. Looking forward. The darkness existed elsewhere. Outside her awareness. Outside the awareness of almost everyone around her. And that is what makes her story so heartbreaking. Because before she became the victim of one of Britain's greatest unsolved mysteries, Jill Dando was simply living. Working. Laughing. Planning. Dreaming. Believing, as all of us do, that tomorrow would arrive exactly as expected. She had earned a respected place in British public life. She had built meaningful relationships. She had created a future worth anticipating. And she had done it while remaining fundamentally true to herself. That is the woman investigators would later seek justice for. That is the woman millions would mourn. And that is the woman whose story deserves to be remembered before the mystery begins. By the spring of 1999, Jill Dando stood at a point in life that many people spend decades trying to reach. She had achieved professional success. She had earned public respect. She had found love. And perhaps most importantly, she appeared genuinely happy. The image most people remember today comes from television archives. Jill smiling into a camera. Jill presenting the news. Jill interviewing guests. Jill standing beneath studio lights with the calm confidence that had become her trademark. But those images capture only fragments of who she was. Away from cameras, away from audiences, away from the expectations that come with national fame, there existed another reality. The reality of a woman preparing for the future. A future that seemed increasingly bright. One of the cruelest aspects of unresolved murder cases is that they force people to examine the victim's life backward. Investigators look for motives. Journalists look for clues. The public looks for explanations. Everyone searches for signs of approaching danger. Yet when people close to Jill reflected on her final months, they often returned to a simpler observation. She was looking forward, not backward. There were plans to discuss. Events to attend. Projects to complete. Personal milestones approaching on the horizon. Her engagement represented a particularly important chapter. Marriage is more than a ceremony. It is a declaration of faith in the future. People do not plan weddings because they are focused on endings. They plan weddings because they believe in beginnings. Family members later spoke about the happiness that accompanied this period of her life. Friends remembered conversations filled with anticipation. Not dramatic excitement. Not unrealistic dreams. Something more meaningful. Contentment. The sense that life was moving in the right direction. That feeling can be difficult to describe. Most people recognize it only in retrospect. It is the quiet confidence that tomorrow holds promise. The belief that good things are coming. The expectation that life will continue unfolding according to plan. Jill seemed to possess that confidence. Not because she believed herself invulnerable. Because she had every reason to feel optimistic. Her professional life continued flourishing. Her personal life appeared stable and fulfilling. The future seemed open. The future seemed welcoming. And the future seemed close. There is a photograph often referenced by those discussing her final years. Like many photographs taken before tragedy strikes, it carries a different emotional weight today than it did when it was captured. At the time, it represented nothing extraordinary. A moment. A smile. A life in progress. Now it represents something else. Evidence of a future interrupted. A reminder of possibilities that never became reality. The same transformation occurs with memories. A casual conversation becomes precious. An ordinary meeting becomes significant. A routine goodbye becomes unforgettable. After Jill's death, countless people found themselves revisiting these moments. Searching them for meaning. Searching them for clues. Searching them for understanding. Yet most discovered the same thing. The memories reflected happiness. Not fear. Normality. Not danger. Life. Not tragedy. This absence of warning became one of the most haunting elements of the case. Because human beings naturally seek patterns. We want causes and effects. Warnings and consequences. Signals and responses. We want the world to make sense. The murder of Jill Dando challenged that desire. The narrative refused to organize itself neatly. The victim did not fit expectations. The circumstances did not fit expectations. Even the investigation would eventually resist expectations. Everything about the case seemed to defy easy explanation. Yet during those final months, none of that complexity was visible. From the outside, Jill's life appeared remarkably straightforward. Busy, certainly. Demanding, undoubtedly. But positive. Friends described someone who remained approachable despite national fame. Someone who continued making time for people she cared about. Someone who never allowed success to create emotional distance. That quality became increasingly rare as her profile grew. Television careers often reshape relationships. Schedules become demanding. Public attention becomes intrusive. Privacy becomes difficult to maintain. Some personalities respond by withdrawing. Others become consumed by celebrity. Jill appeared to choose a different path. She maintained connections. Maintained friendships. Maintained a sense of perspective. Perhaps that grounded nature originated in her upbringing. Perhaps it reflected personality. Perhaps both. Whatever the explanation, it left a lasting impression on those around her. Even years later, many colleagues continued speaking about her with genuine affection. Not merely professional respect. Affection. The distinction matters. People respected her work. They also liked her as a person. That combination contributed significantly to the national response following her death. Britain was not mourning only a television presenter. Britain was mourning someone widely regarded as decent. And decency has a way of touching people deeply, especially when it is taken away suddenly. As April approached, Jill's schedule reflected the life of an established broadcaster. Appearances, meetings, professional responsibilities, the ordinary demands associated with a successful media career. To outsiders, such work can appear glamorous. In reality, much of it consists of preparation and discipline. Early mornings, travel, research, deadlines, constant expectations. Jill handled these pressures effectively because she had spent years developing professional habits. Success did not arrive overnight. It was built through consistency. Day after day. Year after year. That consistency helped create the trust audiences placed in her. Viewers believed what they saw because what they saw was authentic. Yet while the public observed her professional achievements, those closest to her were watching something else unfold. A personal future. The next stage of life. Marriage. New possibilities. New experiences. Those plans now carry a heartbreaking quality because we know they will never happen. But at the time, they felt entirely real. Entirely achievable. Entirely normal. Nobody wakes up expecting their future to vanish. Nobody plans a wedding expecting that plan to become a memory. Nobody says goodbye believing it may be forever. Life depends upon a certain assumption of continuity. The belief that tomorrow exists. Without that belief, ordinary life becomes impossible. Jill shared that assumption. As everyone does. She expected more mornings. More conversations. More broadcasts. More celebrations. More years. Nothing suggested otherwise. And that fact remains one of the most devastating aspects of her story. The murder did not interrupt a life in decline. It interrupted a life moving forward. A life filled with momentum. A life filled with hope. A life filled with possibility. The contrast between those realities creates emotional gravity that extends far beyond the mystery itself. Because even if the case were solved tomorrow, even if every question received a definitive answer, one truth would remain unchanged. A future was stolen. A future that appeared bright. A future that many people believed would be long and fulfilling. That loss sits at the center of the story. Not the theories. Not the suspects. Not the courtroom battles. The loss. Everything else emerged afterward. As April 26th approached, London continued moving through its familiar routines. People traveled to work. Children attended school. Businesses opened. Life unfolded normally. The city had no reason to expect that it was approaching one of the most shocking crimes in modern British history. Neither did Jill. She was living her life. Making plans. Thinking about the future. Trusting in tomorrow. The very things that make her story relatable are the things that make it heartbreaking. Because her final weeks were not extraordinary. They were ordinary. Beautifully ordinary. Filled with the same hopes shared by millions of people. The same assumptions. The same expectations. And perhaps that is why her death resonated so deeply. People saw themselves in her story. Not the fame. Not the television career. The humanity. The routines. The plans. The belief that life would continue. That belief connects all of us. And when it is shattered without warning, the result feels profoundly unfair. The nation would soon discover just how unfair life can be. But at this point in the story, none of that had happened yet. The headlines had not been written. The police investigation had not begun. The questions had not emerged. There was only Jill Dando. A woman at the height of her career. A woman surrounded by opportunity. A woman looking toward the future. A woman who had absolutely no idea that she was living the final chapter of her life. And as the calendar moved closer to the morning of April 26, 1999, the gap between what she expected and what was waiting for her was growing smaller with every passing hour. If there is one image that emerges most clearly from the memories of those who knew Jill Dando, it is not the image of a celebrity. It is the image of a person who made others feel comfortable. A person who listened. A person who remembered birthdays, returned phone calls, and took genuine interest in the lives of people around her. These details may seem small when compared to the enormity of a murder investigation, yet they matter profoundly. Because they reveal the difference between a public figure and a human being. The public knew Jill as a broadcaster. Her family knew her as a daughter. Her friends knew her as a confidant. Her colleagues knew her as a professional. Her fiancé knew her as the woman he intended to marry. Each of those perspectives captured a different part of the same life. And together they form a picture far richer than the headlines that followed her death. One of the reasons the murder shocked Britain so deeply was because Jill represented something increasingly rare in public life. She seemed untouched by cynicism. That does not mean she was naive. Years in journalism expose people to difficult realities. Crime. Conflict. Human suffering. Dishonesty. Jill had reported on many of those realities throughout her career. Yet she somehow managed to retain an optimism that audiences found reassuring. She understood the darker aspects of the world without becoming defined by them. That balance made her particularly effective as a broadcaster. People trusted her not because she ignored difficult truths, but because she approached them with empathy. When viewers watched her, they sensed humanity. They sensed sincerity. And sincerity creates connection. By 1999, that connection extended throughout the country. Millions recognized her face. Millions knew her voice. Millions associated her with reliability. Yet fame often creates an illusion. People begin believing they know someone because they see them regularly. In reality, they know only fragments. The final months of Jill's life remind us of the difference. Behind every television appearance existed a private world invisible to viewers. A world filled with conversations, hopes, responsibilities, and plans. A world that seemed increasingly promising. Those who spent time with her during that period frequently described a woman who appeared content. Not because life was perfect. No life ever is. But because she had reached a stage where many important pieces seemed to be falling into place. Professionally, she stood among the most respected broadcasters in Britain. Personally, she was preparing for marriage. Emotionally, she seemed optimistic about what lay ahead. There is something especially heartbreaking about interrupted happiness. When tragedy strikes a life already filled with struggle, people often focus on the suffering that came before. When tragedy strikes a life moving toward joy, people focus on the future that never arrived. The murder of Jill Dando belongs to the second category. Again and again, those who knew her returned to the same theme. Potential. Not simply professional potential. Personal potential. Life potential. The future she was building. The experiences she had not yet lived. The milestones she had not yet reached. The years she had not yet enjoyed. Every homicide steals a future. But some losses feel particularly visible because the future was so clearly defined. Jill's future appeared tangible. People could see it. Imagine the conversations occurring in her life during those months. Discussions about wedding arrangements. Thoughts about upcoming projects. Plans for holidays. Family gatherings. Ordinary decisions that seem insignificant at the time. Those conversations now possess a painful quality because we know something the participants did not. Many of those plans would never happen. Many of those conversations would never continue. Many of those dreams would remain unfinished. The contrast between expectation and reality sits at the emotional center of this story. Because while investigators would later focus on evidence, timelines, and suspects, the people closest to Jill were confronting something far simpler. Absence. The sudden disappearance of someone they loved. The empty space left behind. The realization that future memories would never be created. Grief often begins with disbelief. A refusal to accept reality. An insistence that a mistake has been made. For those who knew Jill, that disbelief was amplified by the circumstances of her death. Violence seemed incompatible with the person they knew. The idea that someone would deliberately target her felt impossible. Yet impossible things sometimes happen. And when they do, they leave wounds that never fully heal. As investigators later examined every aspect of Jill's life, they encountered an unusual challenge. Most murder investigations begin by identifying conflict. Who was angry? Who stood to gain? Who held a grudge? Who possessed motive? The deeper detectives looked into Jill's personal world, the harder those questions became to answer. Relationships appeared stable. Friendships appeared healthy. Professional interactions appeared positive. No obvious explanation emerged. The absence of clear enemies became one of the defining characteristics of the case. In some ways, that absence increased public fascination. Mysteries become especially compelling when they violate expectations. People understand crimes driven by jealousy. They understand crimes driven by greed. They understand crimes driven by revenge. The murder of Jill Dando seemed disconnected from those familiar narratives. The victim appeared universally liked. The method suggested planning. The motive remained invisible. That combination transformed the case into something larger than a typical homicide investigation. It became a puzzle. A national puzzle. One that millions attempted to solve. Yet before the mystery existed, before the speculation, before the debates and documentaries, there was simply a woman living her life. A woman whose daily routines were remarkably ordinary despite extraordinary fame. She shopped. Visited friends. Made phone calls. Attended meetings. Spent time with loved ones. The same activities shared by countless others. Perhaps that normality is what makes the story resonate so strongly. It reminds us that tragedy rarely announces itself. Most people do not realize they are experiencing the final ordinary day of their lives. They wake up. Make plans. Run errands. Think about tomorrow. Jill was no different. She could not see what was coming. Neither could the people around her. The future appeared open. And because the future appeared open, she continued moving toward it. One day at a time. One plan at a time. One conversation at a time. As April 1999 progressed, there was no public indication that her life was approaching a catastrophic turning point. No visible countdown. No apparent threat. No warning sign obvious enough to change the course of events. That fact would later haunt investigators. Because every unsolved case inspires the same question. Could it have been prevented? Could something have been noticed? Could someone have intervened? The Jill Dando case offers no easy answers. Perhaps there were clues. Perhaps there were none. Perhaps the truth remains hidden among details that seemed meaningless at the time. Whatever the explanation, the result was devastating. A woman admired by millions. A woman loved by many. A woman standing at the threshold of a promising future. And a tragedy waiting just beyond the horizon. As we prepare to enter the next chapter of this story, it is important to pause and remember who Jill Dando was before violence overshadowed everything else. She was not merely a victim. She was not merely a mystery. She was not merely a headline. She was a daughter whose family loved her. A friend whose presence mattered. A colleague whose professionalism earned respect. A fiancé planning a future. A broadcaster trusted by millions. A woman whose life contained far more than the circumstances of her death. That life deserves to be remembered. Because once the events of April 26th begin, the story changes forever. The ordinary routines disappear. The future disappears. The sense of safety disappears. In their place comes confusion, fear, questions, and one of the most shocking crimes Britain has ever witnessed. The woman we have come to know through these memories is about to step unknowingly into the final morning of her life. A morning that will begin like any other. A morning filled with routine. A morning that seems completely unremarkable. Until a single moment transforms it into history. And once that moment arrives, neither her family, nor investigators, nor an entire nation will ever look at that day the same way again. Monday, April 26, 1999, began as an ordinary spring morning. Nothing about the sunrise over London suggested that by the end of the day, the entire nation would be struggling to comprehend one of the most shocking crimes in modern British history. The city woke slowly. Morning light spilled across rooftops and brick facades. Traffic began gathering on busy roads. Commuters stepped onto trains. Shopkeepers unlocked doors. Delivery drivers followed familiar routes. Life unfolded according to routines repeated thousands of times before. In West London, the neighbourhood of Fulham shared in that ordinary rhythm. The streets were quiet but not silent. Residents moved through the routines of a working Monday. Curtains opened. Cars started. People left their homes carrying briefcases, shopping bags, newspapers, and coffee cups. Nothing appeared unusual. Nothing appeared threatening. Nothing hinted that somewhere within the calm order of the morning, violence was waiting. For Jill Dando, the day also began normally. There was no dramatic sense of foreboding. No warning. No visible sign that she was moving toward the final hours of her life. Like countless other mornings before it, April 26th seemed destined to become another ordinary date on the calendar. The tragedy of hindsight is that it transforms ordinary moments into heartbreaking ones. Every action acquires significance. Every decision becomes part of a timeline. Every minute matters. But on that morning, Jill could not know that investigators would one day examine her movements in extraordinary detail. She could not know that journalists would reconstruct her final hours. She could not know that millions of people would eventually become familiar with the events of that day. To her, it was simply Monday. A normal day. A normal morning. A normal future stretching ahead. At 37 years old, Jill stood at a point in life where many things seemed to be coming together. Her career remained strong. Her personal life appeared happy. Her engagement represented a promising new chapter. The future still felt open and welcoming. Friends would later reflect on how optimistic she seemed during this period. There were plans, goals, expectations. The kinds of things people discuss when they assume they have years ahead of them. No one wakes up expecting tragedy. Human beings rely upon a quiet faith in tomorrow. Without it, ordinary life becomes impossible. Jill shared that faith. As everyone does. She expected another day. Another week. Another month. Another year. She expected life to continue. What happened next would shatter that expectation forever. As the morning progressed, Jill visited her fiancé. The visit was unremarkable. Simple. Routine. One of those everyday interactions that couples experience countless times without imagining their significance. Later, after the murder, investigators would examine every detail. Times. Locations. Conversations. Movements. Not because anything appeared suspicious. Because investigators had no choice. When a murder occurs, ordinary events become evidence. Normal routines become critical information. The entire fabric of a victim's life is suddenly examined through a different lens. Yet at the time, none of those actions felt important. They were simply part of a normal day. After spending time with her fiancé, Jill made her way back toward Fulham. Along the route, she stopped briefly to purchase a few items. Another routine activity. Another ordinary moment. The kind of task so common that people usually forget it within hours. But this was not an ordinary day. And these would not remain ordinary moments. As the late morning approached, London continued moving around her. Cars passed through intersections. Pedestrians crossed streets. Workers sat behind desks. Children attended school. The city remained completely unaware that one of its most famous residents was approaching a fatal encounter. Somewhere within that same city, another person may have been watching the clock. Perhaps waiting. Perhaps preparing. Perhaps already positioned. We do not know. That uncertainty forms one of the darkest aspects of the case. Because while investigators can reconstruct parts of Jill's morning, the killer's actions remain largely hidden. The two timelines converge only briefly, for a matter of seconds, then separate forever. Around 11:30 a.m., Jill arrived at her home on Gowan Avenue in Fulham. The neighborhood itself appeared peaceful. Rows of respectable houses lined the street. Residents came and went. Nothing about the location suggested danger. Nothing about the scene appeared extraordinary. It was daylight. Not darkness. A residential area. Not an isolated location. The kind of place where people expect safety. The kind of place where neighbors recognize one another. The kind of place where violent crime feels distant. Yet appearances can be deceptive. Some of history's most shocking crimes have occurred in environments that seemed entirely secure. The contrast between location and violence often amplifies public shock. That would certainly prove true here. Jill parked her car. She carried the items she had purchased. She walked toward the front entrance. Everything appeared normal. Everything appeared routine. She was only moments away from stepping inside. Only moments away from safety. Only moments away from continuing with the rest of her day. The distance between life and death can sometimes be measured in seconds. As Jill approached the doorway, she began unlocking the front door. It was a simple action. One she had performed countless times before. A movement so familiar it likely required almost no conscious thought. Keys. Lock. Door. Home. An ordinary sequence. Then something changed. Somewhere behind her, a figure approached. Exactly what happened during the next few moments remains one of the most intensely examined questions in British criminal history. The attack itself was astonishingly brief. No lengthy confrontation. No argument. No warning visible to witnesses. No struggle. The available evidence suggests that the assailant moved close to Jill. Very close. Close enough to ensure accuracy. Close enough to eliminate uncertainty. Close enough to transform the attack into something chillingly personal. Then came the shot. One shot. Only one. A single gunshot fired at extremely close range. The bullet struck Jill in the head. The precision was devastating. There was no second attempt. No additional violence. No prolonged attack. Just one shot. One calculated action. One irreversible moment. The efficiency disturbed investigators almost immediately. This did not resemble uncontrolled rage. It did not resemble panic. It did not resemble a spontaneous act. Everything about the shooting suggested confidence. Preparation. Purpose. The killer appeared to know exactly what they intended to do. And they accomplished it within seconds. Jill collapsed outside her own home. The attack was over almost as quickly as it had begun. The entire sequence may have lasted only moments. Yet those moments would alter countless lives. For her family. For her friends. For her colleagues. For investigators. For the public. For Britain itself. The killer did not remain at the scene. There was no attempt to steal property. No attempt to enter the house. No attempt to communicate a message. Instead, the attacker simply left. Vanishing into the surrounding streets. Disappearing back into the ordinary flow of London life. That disappearance would become one of the defining characteristics of the case. The shooting occurred in daylight. In a populated area. Yet the killer escaped. The contradiction seemed almost impossible. How could such a crime occur so publicly and still leave so few answers? Investigators would spend years wrestling with that question. In the immediate aftermath, however, no one understood the scale of the mystery that had just begun. The street remained largely unaware. Nearby residents continued with daily routines. People moved through ordinary tasks. Life continued. For a few crucial moments, the enormity of what had happened remained hidden. Then reality began spreading outward. Like ripples across water. A discovery. A realization. A call for help. A growing understanding that something terrible had occurred. Within a short time,